The latest episode of the Good Sports podcast and web series features Hazleton Area High School Athletic Director Fred Barletta Jr. The sports journalist and former girls track and field coach talks about a number of different topics, including covering a few World Series games. At one point, Barletta talked about the 50th anniversary of Title IX with myself and Standard Speaker sports editor Dave Seaman. Title IX makes sure that no one in the United States, because of their gender, is excluded or subjected to discrimination in any education program or activity that gets federal financial assistance. Here's the clip from Good Sports.
I can start by telling you, when I'm at Hazleton High School as a student and an athlete, the girls' basketball team, they wore skirts. Only 2 girls were allowed to shoot. The other girls were only allowed to pass the ball. I just stop and think about that.
Is there a reason for that?
Well, this went back. This was prior to Title IX. The thought was that, this is they're girls, for crying out loud. This is physical sports. I mean, there were hardly any sports for girls. I saw that landscape and actually was part of it. And I remember a former colleague at the Standard Speaker, and still a colleague to Dave, Rich Garcella. I still remember an article he wrote back in the early 80s called "Girls No Longer Belong on the Sidelines." And that was the thought. If you're a girl, be a cheerleader or something. Be in the pom-pom squad. You can't be in competitive sports. And I remember even with track, which I ended up coaching, I can remember older people, coaches, saying to me, "Are you really expecting girls to run for 2 miles? You're expecting them to throw a shot put. You're expecting them to," and I'm like, well, yeah, why not? But that was just the mentality. And Title IX, one of the great things to ever take place, celebrating its 50th year, and you just look at the sports landscape today and what girls' sports, particularly here in Hazleton, but from coast to coast. It's just amazing. And you see some of these female athletes and you think 50 years ago the thought was they could never do this.
What female athletes were you able to coach that you looked at and were like, wow, this? I'm sure there's a ton of them. I mean, that go back. But again, you think of the track and field team, the javelin champions that have been produced recently. But there's probably been so many. But I mean, who do you think of?
You got to think of Teresa Lorenzi, I think.
Well, Teresa Lorenzi was one of the first great total athletes, like not only just one sport. She may not have been the best basketball player, and she may not have been the best track athlete. She's in the top, 5 or whatever. But she was one of the best athletes that I had ever seen. Kelly Hunt was a collegiate All-American in the Big Ten out at Penn State. And I was fortunate enough with her. Amy Mantush, who's going into the Luzerne County Hall of Fame. The Ritzes. You could talk about genetics, between Sandy Ritz and Rachel Ritz and Lynn Ritz. It was unbelievable. How am I going to sit here and with Dave Seaman right here on set without Jillian Seaman and all of these girls that I'm mentioning, they all were Division I collegiate athletes, successful Division I collegiate athletes, and that is not easy to do. Even if you want to compare the male gender ones, it's really a small list of successful athletes that we have had that go on to compete at Division I collegiate levels. And the girls that have done this, Joy Gallagher comes to mind. I didn't coach Joy. She was a softball player. You start talking softball players.
She played 2 sports, too.
She played 2 sports. I tell people, just my humble opinion, Marissa Trivalpiece might be the best softball player I've ever seen in this area, and out at Michigan State. And she had a couple sisters that were pretty good, but this one, to me, I think is the best softball player I've ever seen. So that list goes on and on and on. And now, like you said, javelin, Julie Franzosa wins the state championship, which we thought, wow, might never see that again. Well, we did see it again. And, Kayla Merkel just missed one on the last throw, or we would have had a third state champion. And, Abby now just graduated, has a state championship under her belt. It's just amazing to me. And I kind of just smile when I think how many people questioned it back in the late 70s. Girls aren't going to be able to do this.
Covering it from the other standpoint, I mean, was it all, you said, Dave, it kind of grew, but I mean, as we think about, the attention the Hazelton area softball program gets when they go to 2 state championship games, I mean, the spotlight really has shown on them. Did you see that change over time as well?
It gradually took place, but, the thing that I always gauged it by, and this happened not right off the bat in the late 70s or early 80s, but by the late 80s and into the early 90s, if a girls' team was doing well, all of a sudden, the crowds, it were some of the same fans that were coming out for the boys' sports. And a great analogy would be basketball. You would see people, if a Hazelton team was playing for the District 2 championship or going in state playoffs, you would see some of the exact same fans who were coming out for the boys' games, and I'm thinking, that never would have happened before. Dave will remember this, and I point this out to people. When Hazelton made the switch from District 11 to District 2 and into the Wyoming Valley Conference, pretty good in the Lehigh Valley. We played winter sports down there, so the girls' basketball played down there. It was pretty rugged. When we moved up to the Wyoming Valley Conference, girls' sports, including girls' basketball, were played at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. They didn't even play them in prime time. And that's because nobody went to the games. But that's certainly not the case now. And, if you have a good girls' team, you see the fans come out and the excitement come out no different than if it was a good boys' team. And that was true with softball. People wanting to get on that bandwagon and where's the softball team playing? And you guys covered it. You saw the crowds. Looked very similar to baseball.
Sports on SSPTV News is brought to you by the Lehigh Valley Health Network.